Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to another trailer breakdown video. We haven't done one of these in a while, but today I'm very excited to do a deep dive analysis of the Chaos Range trailer, to give you all a clearer perspective of what's coming our way, and of course different ideas for how this story could unfold. Because the trailer itself is us simply judging and analysing it from a surface level, so there could be far more going on here than meets the eye. And I will say that this trailer in itself is one that juggles a lot, and I mean a lot of different ideas and concepts across the series, tapping into us seeing more titans, and even relics of the past like the kamidogus. With that said, before we do begin, I do wish to reinforce and reiterate that I'll be solely focusing on the story aspects and elements of this trailer, as it will allow me to streamline things without having it be too cluttered. So I won't be touching on the gameplay, the anamlities, or even the guest characters here, as they themselves kind of deserve a video. And please do keep in mind, with this being a breakdown video, there is the possibility that I may spoil something within the story, so please be warned before jumping right into things. But before we do begin, as always, I would of course super appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up. It may seem like a really small thing, but trust me when I say it really does a lot for the channel in the algorithm, as it's pretty much the best way of showing your support. Anyway, let's dive right into things. Now the trailer itself opens up in a very mysterious manner, in a place I can only describe as the Void, a place suspended in time and space that does look to defy the laws of physics. Now judging by the framing of this shot, and how it cuts to Havik, I do believe this to be his stronghold, or at the very least, his base of operations, as it does perfectly encapsulate the nature of his character. I mean, hell, there always is actually the possibility that this is the Chaos Realm itself. In the foreground of this shot, we do see 5 mysterious figures strolling through these wastelands, and we are able to decipher a few of them, as we do see Sektor, Cyrax, and Scorpion, as well as 2 other new mysterious figures. Ones that look to be timeline variants of characters we've come to know. One we can most certainly decipher is the World War II take on Johnny Cage, a character that is actually revealed during the trailer itself. So yes, it does look like we will be diving back into some timeline variants. Now as for the figure leading them into the Void, I'm not actually too sure, as I'm unable to decipher her costume, but judging by its aesthetic and design, I do believe this to possibly be Tanya. It's quite hard to gauge with all of these timeline anomalies. If I was to set this scene, I do believe this to happen somewhere in the middle ground of the story, possibly in pursuit of Bihan, because as we do see, he is in the clutches of Havik. And it would also explain why Sektor and Cyrax are working alongside Kuai Liang, someone who they do deem as a traitor. From this shot, we do go on to see Havik strolling up a staircase, presumably to what looks to be a throne. Judging by the architecture, as well as the next few shots, it does look like Havik has either created his own citadel or a coliseum, as we do see an entire audience of his variants cheering him in the crowd. Now there is actually the possibility that this audience isn't just cheering for him, but for more bloodshed. Because as we see throughout the trailer, Havik is kidnapping combatants for his own wishes and desires. Some for power, some for servants, and maybe even some for entertainment. And if his end monologue of Mortal Kombat 1 is anything to go by, where he wishes the chaos to never end, then this is definitely a way to achieve that, as their mortality could simply serve as his entertainment. It also could be yet another reason why Kuai and his team have entered his domain. Now the opening monologue here does say a lot about what's going on, and it can indeed give us some insight into what his actual plan is during this expansion, as he does say the following: "There are no sacred laws, no divine rules. I choose what is right, I hold the power, and I choose to bless all things everywhere with anarchy." So what does this truly mean? Well, throughout the trailer, we do see Havik, and more specifically his chest, embedded with 6 different magical mystical gems. Ones that look to be an incredible source of power. But where and how does he get it? Because when we are first introduced to him, everything seems to be perfectly fine. Well, as we dive deeper into the trailer, when we do see him interact with Liu Kang, presumably their first encounter, he seems to be notably fine, and it's only till afterwards where we do see the 6 gems embedded in his chest. Whilst the finer details of this haven't been confirmed via this trailer, there is only one collection of 6 gems in all of the Mortal Kombat realms that fit this criteria, and that is the kamidogus, and ones that look to grant him immense power. Now, to add more context and sense to it all, the kamidogus could be seen as somewhat keys to the ancient primordial being, the One Being, the very first deity that would be torn apart by the Elder Gods and harvested into the realms itself. The One Being in particular has always been a very elusive figure in the series, because although he does not have a physical body, he's an individual responsible for influencing many figures across the series, because by doing so, he can return back to life, hence why there's always been the overarching plot of the realms merging. However, there is a slight caveat to this, because not every figure is susceptible to its influence, as divine beings like Onaga during his prime, or even Shinnok, are free of his grasp. And I do believe Havik to be one of those freed of his snare. With the hourglass of time at his fingertips, hypothetically, this should elevate him beyond his influence. Hence why Havik himself isn't so much interested in the merge of the realms, but instead utilizing the power of the One Being to spread anarchy across the realms. And with so many Havik variants in the crowd, it's very possible that he plans on spreading this madness to their realities. As for the kamidogus themselves, don't you worry, I'll touch on that a little bit later, as there is a particular shot that I do believe gives this all away. Now, our final shot of him during this opening sequence is where he does say the speech, flailing around an arm with Cyrax in the background. Now, judging by the context of things here, it does look like this may take place after his plan has failed. It's a very ambitious assumption on my end, but with this framing as well as his mad rant, I think it does make some sense here. As for whose arm that is he's swinging around, it's really awkward to say and see, but judging by its fleshy appearance and design, I do believe it to be one of his, or maybe having belonged to another Havik. Now, following the opening credits, we do get some really important key reveals here, as there is an overarching monologue from Kitana that does touch on Havik's arrival. This new Havik is different from ours. He doesn't want freedom, he wants to burn everything down. And this pretty much more or less confirms that the Havik we do have here is more akin to the Havik we have of old. So the Dairo variant does look to be shelved here. From a visual perspective, there's a lot of setup here, because this shot of Havik here is with 2 different Chaos Timeline variants, one with Kenshi and one with Takeda by his side. And in the middle here, it does look like he's accumulating a wealth of power. What for? Well, I think I have a pretty solid idea. Now, one thing I want to focus on and reinforce is that here, Havik obviously doesn't have the kamidogus, which means that this opening sequence must happen very early on in the story, and we see the same appearance later on during his first encounter with Liu Kang. So this must occur during the first or second chapter of the DLC, and as he's fighting off Liu Kang, Lao and Raiden, if we freeze things at just the right frame, we can see what Havik was actually planning to do. He was opening up a portal from his dimension in order to attack and captured Geras, a pursuit that he's clearly successful in, because our next shot here is one of Geras strapped up to an apparatus with a number of different horrific injections lodged into his back, ones that we do later see be waved in front of Bihan's face. So with that in mind, I think it's quite safe to assume that these are designed to change and alter someone's being, as we do see the effects of it on Bihan. But with Geras, a Warden Eternal, and someone who has a wealth of knowledge that exists eons through multiple timelines, I do have the unfortunate belief that the Titan of Chaos is looking to harvest his life force into that of the kamidogus, transformed into nothing more than a tool. Now our next shot here is one that breaks away from all of the anarchy and presumably takes us to that of Earthrealm, as here we are finally introduced to Cyrax and Sektor. And right out the gate, things look to be very different for these two. Of course, there is the elephant in the room, there is the gender bend take on these two now being female characters. But most interestingly to me is that this officially confirms the very new and very different take on the Cyber Initiative, as they have no longer been gutted and forced into suits. Thus, under the direction and vision of Bihan, he believes the cybernetic suits to function as a way to amplify their skill and power, instead of something that removes and dulls their senses. During our first introduction to this Lin Kuei, we do see them leading a siege on what looks to be a very different area of the Wuxi Academy, as the architecture in the background is eerily similar to the stage itself. Plus, it also does explain why we do see a lot of Shaolin monks, as well as what I believe to be our first look at the Shirai Ryu. Now, the purpose behind why this is all happening does look to be an assassination attempt on Kuai Liang's life, and it does look to be on the day of his wedding no less. Although it isn't revealed through any dialogue of the game, the costumes at the end of this trailer more or less confirm the time of this attack on the arrival. The big question now is, do we get our first ever in-game glimpse of Harumi, or even the young Hanzo Hisashi? That is something we must wait and see. Now, these two scenes in particular do seem to thread and weave in and out of each other, because with this huge attack and siege on the way, Bihan is noticeably absent during the entire sequence, possibly hinting that he's already been kidnapped by Havik, which in turn may have led to this attack from the Lin Kuei here, as they may feel provoked by his mysterious disappearance, and the fact that the Shirai Ryu are their rivals. Interestingly so, we do hear some exposition between Cyrax and Kuai Liang, with Kuai understandably enraged by his brother's perversion of their clan, believing the cybernetics to having tainted their father's vision. It's here where we do get a retort from Cyrax, saying that they only took this path due to his treachery. But this doesn't look to be a feud that lasts for very long, because judging by this opening shot here, they must have found a middle ground that brought them together. And I believe that all ties into our next reveal here, Noob Saibot. And there's a lot to take away from his return, as it's pretty damn clear that Bihan was transformed against his will, because there's a shot of him here, quite literally being dragged into Geras' chambers, completely unconscious and strapped to a table, injected with those horrific serums. Now, upon our first introduction to the character, Noob does look to be a very loyal acolyte of Havik, having been fully brainwashed, as the first words we hear from his lips are "the future is chaos, and all must embrace it," only being further solidified between a verbal exchange with himself and Sektor, as she says, "You sound like Bihan," to which he retorts, "I am he, but not as you remember." Thus, it's pretty damn clear that under the Cleric of Chaos's influence, he is more or less stripped of his identity of Bihan. Of course, during this trailer, we do see a rematch with Kuai Liang, yet there are a lot of other shots in the trailer that shows his influence under Havik is a temporary one, as he's seen fighting and killing a Chaos version of himself, as well as his brother. Now, with the big character shots out the way, we get some enlightening revelations here. One where Havik is standing in front of Titan Shang Tsung's gateways. It looks like with the fall of the Master Manipulator, the Titan of Chaos would seek to utilize these portals for his own nefarious means. And with the kamidogus embedded in his flesh, he is now able to create holes, tears, and ripples throughout reality. And again, if we go back to the opening dialogue from earlier, I do believe he wishes to spearhead his madness beyond Liu Kang's reality, to quite literally spread it to every other world. And with the power of the kamidogus infused to his flesh. He is able to take that primordial power and utilize it to power up the gates, which is what I do think he shows at the end of this trailer here. Now keep in mind, this is merely a theory, but it's one crafted from the information they have laid out throughout the trailer. Following this sequence, we do get a flash of a number of different shots here. One where we once again see Liu Kang's encounter with Havik, but there's a very quick snap cut here where we see Cyrax undonning her mask during the assault at Kuai Liang's wedding, pulling a very shocked face and expression. So that means that one of two things has happened here. Either that there's been a very big revelation, with maybe Kuai having revealed to her the fate of their father and how it was Bi-Han who had killed him, or, and I will say that this looks to be the most obvious option of the two, that someone has died during this wedding. Looking at you, Harumi. It's just a theory, but one that definitely lines up with the Scorpion character. And then we get a large panned action shot, one that takes place around Shang Tsung's portals. Now, if I'm a betting man, with all of the information and details I've talked about and discussed here, I'm gonna presume that the battle we have at these gateways will be the final chapter of the game, because it is where Havik releases his power. Plus, we do later have a shot of Noob Saibot fighting alongside Liu Kang, confronting Chaos Kenshi and Takeda, who are the two responsible for imprisoning him. Our next and a very important key shot is one of Cyrax facing Sektor in the Living Forest. Again, judging by how we've kind of etched out the timeline here, this must occur after the two exit the astral plane, with Bi-Han either under the influence of Havik or having just been released. And you would think after this their goal would be achieved, but it's here where the two would come to blows. If I am theorizing and guessing what's happened here, I would imagine it's over leadership of the clan. If I am guessing, knowing the nature of Sektor, whilst in this era it was Bi-Han's idea to create the Cyber Initiative, maybe it is Sektor's that believes that it's one perfected with no human consciousness, one's purged of hesitation and morals. So a more traditional old school take on the cyberlink way. Thus, I can ultimately see that being the wedge that drives Cyrax and Sektor apart. Kind of similar to Bi-Han and Kuai Liang in that respect. Also, during one of these fight sequences here, we do actually see the Fire Temple in tatters. As for how, we don't know why, as not too much is seen of it in the trailer, as it primarily focuses on Noob's arrival. So all in all everyone, this has been it for my in-depth breakdown and analysis of the Chaos Range trailer. And dear lord, is there a lot to pull away from it, as each returning character here has a very new, fresh and different take on them. One that takes their core and modernizes it to fit in within the confines of the new era. So it's been a pretty daunting task, all things considered, but one that I found to be very fun. And I must say that the Havik stuff does seem very promising. Whilst I have been pretty vocal towards the multiverse arc and direction, I do find it to be one very fitting for this particular character. Because for what better reason would you have to fight these twisted, deformed versions of characters than ones that serve under Havik, or are ones created and corrupted by him? It makes a lot more logical sense than what we had for Shang Tsung, and the reincorporation of the kamidogus is a very intriguing one, as we haven't canonically seen them since Mortal Kombat Deception. So honestly, it's great to see them return, especially clearly being a very pivotal part of the game's main narrative. And whilst I'm not hedging my bets on the one being's full return, I'm naturally very curious to see what someone will do with that much power, as it's not something I actually thought was kinda possible before. But with that said, and everything covered here, what are your thoughts on the trailer? What are you the most excited to see? And of course, is there anything at all that you did pick up on the trailer that I didn't mention here? Please do comment down below, as it's honestly a great window, time and opportunity to discuss any thoughts and theories surrounding the DLC. I will be checking them out. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.